Hi, my name is Laura Rolfe, and I am host of Powered by Franchising and a certified franchise consultant. I am thrilled to welcome a very special guest and friend, Bobby Chung, the E2 Visa attorney, to the show today, where we're going to chat all about E2 Visa and franchising and those international investors. Welcome to the show, Bobby.
Thank you, Laura. I'm so excited to speak with you.
So you have been working with international investors for a number of years now. Uh, Tell us a little bit about your passion and how you got started as the E2 visa attorney.
Absolutely happy to share. I've been practicing law for about 24 years now as an immigration attorney. I'm an immigrant myself and I immigrated with my family 43 years ago to the United States. Came from a family of entrepreneurs. So it's entrepreneurship is my DNA. So when I became an immigration attorney, helping fellow immigrants, I just gravitated towards entrepreneurship. So I started specializing in E2 investor visa and fell in love with it because the people get to work with, entrepreneurs, are optimistic, positive, and always looking for a better future and really aligns with my values. And then about 14 years ago, I started working with franchise consultants in like collaboration partnership to jointly help foreign investors. And it's just been an amazing journey so far.
Well, it's definitely been a pleasure working with you and helping our mutual clients invest in a franchise business and then secure their E2 visa. So, for any of our listeners who are unfamiliar with what an E2 visa is, can you give us a broad overview?
Definitely. The E2 Investor Visa is a US visa program specifically designed for foreign citizen entrepreneurs to move to the United States with their immediate family members, spouse, and minor children based on investing in a qualifying US business. And the visa will allow them to live here and run their business, and their spouse can live here and work, go to school, kids can go to school, and have a life here. It is a temporary visa and it's issued in 2 to 5 year increments, but it is renewable forever.
And so, what are some of the main requirements for the E2 investor visa?
Great question. There are several key requirements. First, they have to be a citizen of a treaty country. So not all the countries in the world qualify. Out of the 195 countries worldwide, citizens of 83 countries are eligible for the E2 visa. And that list is growing. Every time the United States signs an E2 treaty with a foreign country, that list grows. The other key requirements are they have to make a substantial financial investment into the US business, either starting a new business or acquiring a qualifying existing business. And it should be a business that makes enough money to be able to support the family with a comfortable living in the USA. And the business should also contribute meaningfully to the economy by creating some jobs for American workers.
Now, we know that people can invest in a variety of businesses. It can be a new business, it can be a resale. But many people consider franchise businesses because you don't necessarily have to be an expert in the business venture to invest in a franchise. What are some of the other considerations, or why would you say franchising is a good option for E2 investor visa candidates to look at?
Really good question. It's a very important question. One of the key priorities of foreign citizen investors when they're making this investment is to get an E2 visa approval. They're using the investment as a vehicle to move themselves and their family to the United States. So the E2 visa success is the most important goal. And US immigration authorities, when they're adjudicating an E2 visa application, one of the key factors is looking at the potential success of the business. And this is especially important where it's a new territory, a startup, where the future potential success is kind of speculative. There's no guarantees in life or business. So the more credible the business is, the more likely immigration officer is going to trust it and be willing to take a leap of faith and grant the E2 visa. So a franchise business where it's a tried and true proven business model, and if the brand is recognizable to the immigration officer, it's just so much easier for the officer to believe in the potential success because it is a successful business system. On the other hand, if the E2 investor applicant is starting an independent business, for example, then there's really no comparison point, and the scrutiny into the applicant's personal relevant business experience in home country, success track record in that industry becomes really important because they want to see that credibility in order to trust in the potential success. With a franchise investment, they wouldn't need to do that because the brand recognition and the proven business model compensates for any lack of experience in that industry.
Well, and I also like franchising because you have a history of what the investment capital required to start the business that's already been broken out for the candidate so they can create a pro forma, so a budget, and then they can forecast what the probability or likelihood as far as income possibilities might be. Again, like you said, there's no guarantee, but just forecasting and having that information is great for them to set up their interview with the immigration attorney. Are there
Absolutely.
any particular kinds of franchises or industries that you see that are more successful for investor visa candidates?
Yes. Several key factors we want to look at when choosing franchise investment. One, is it a E2 friendly franchise brand, meaning a franchise brand that has experience with the E2 visa, meaning they already have E2 franchisees, or they openly welcome and support E2 investors. That means that they want to grow their brand into the E2 visa market. And that's important because if the franchisor is familiar and motivated to help E2 investors, they're going to be more supportive through this whole E2 visa journey, and it maximizes the probability of success. Also, franchise brands that are job creating business models are easier for immigration officials to trust in the future job creation intention, because most of these E2 applicants are buying new territories. So they haven't really created any jobs or haven't created much jobs yet. So a lot of the job creating intention is based on projections. And it's just way more believable if the nature of the business model requires hiring American workers. So we want to steer toward job creating business models and franchisors that are supportive and welcoming of foreign citizen E2 investors.
Terrific. Yes. So I represent about 800 plus different brands, including franchise resales. Some of the franchises that I work with are terrific in supporting those E2 investor visa candidates, and others tend to shy away from them. I think just because they don't understand the E2 visa process. So it's part education as well. So it's a fun journey to work with those foreign investors and help them find the right fit, and then make sure that they are going to get the support that they're looking for when investing in that business. Now, Bobby, are there any common mistakes that you've seen E2 visa applicants make, and how can those be avoided?
Definitely. There are a number of mistakes that I see that could be avoided, and with enough pre-planning and proper guidance from the experts. So one of the key requirements of E2 visa is demonstrating the lawful and qualifying source of the investment fund. So even if the business is great and the investment business establishment is very strong and credible, if the immigration official doesn't like the source of funds, they'll deny the E2 visa on that alone. So a lot of times I would recommend clients that while they're searching for businesses to invest in, they ought to simultaneously start doing financial due diligence, make sure that they can prove that the money that they're going to be using for the investment are from lawful origin, that they have the proof of the lawful origin, lawful acquisition of the investment funds, and that they have possession and control of the funds in their bank account ready to deploy into the US business investment. What I see a lot of people do is either they haven't vetted the source of the investment funds. They haven't really focused on that. They're just putting 100% of their attention on business search. And by the time they work so hard to narrow down the business search to the one they love and they're ready to commit and purchase, And then they bring me in at that point to guide them. And I realize the money that they're going to be using doesn't qualify. They don't have enough proof, or it's just simply not a qualifying source of funds. So that's something you want to work on to minimize unnecessary delay with the business purchase. And what the consequence of that is sometimes you lose out on great franchise territories because you're not ready to commit because the money is not ready yet. So that's one example. Another example is not setting up the business in time. So beyond buying a franchise, you need to create a United States business entity, and you need to open a bank account. You need to get a tax ID number, and that takes time, especially if it's a foreign citizen. It may take a little bit more time than a U.S. citizen creating an entity. And typically, I recommend people get that going early so that while simultaneously working with a franchise consultant on the business search. And the idea is that by the time you help them find the right franchise for their investment, they've created an entity, they got an EIN, they've opened a bank account, they deposited the qualifying investment capital into the US business account and ready to deploy that capital to buy the franchise and sign a franchise agreement under the entity name. That would be the most efficient way of proceeding with the E2 investment.
Now, as far as investment funds, there are some things that preclude people that they can't do. So getting an SBA loan in the US is not something that an E2 visa candidate is eligible for to use as substantial funds for their investment. And then I've also had clients come to me who they're looking for a business for their cousins in a treaty country, but the person who lives in the US is going to 100% fund that. Can you talk to us about who needs to have the funds and who needs to invest in that qualifying business?
Yes, great question. So the whole one of the key purpose of the E2 Investor Visa program is for the foreign citizen to bring his or her own capital to invest in a United States business. So the financial contribution into the U.S. business needs to be substantially contributed by the foreign investor, not the U.S. partner. So the U.S. partner could contribute some money, but the predominant majority needs to come from the foreign citizen investor. That's a core fundamental requirement of the E2 visa. Now, a common misconception is that the money must come from the foreign citizen's home country. That's just not true. The foreign citizen simply needs to prove that the money belongs to him or her and was acquired lawfully. So the money could come from a third country or it could originate from the United States. So for example, I've had a number of clients that have friends or relatives in the United States, and they gift or loan funds to the E2 applicant, my client, for their E2 investment. And as long as the gift or the personal loan is structured in the proper way, they could source their investment capital from that third-party donor or lender based in the United States. So the money really is originated from the United States, but it could be qualifying fund source if it was transferred to the foreign citizen and structured in the right loan or gift structure.
Well, this is one of the reasons why it's so important to garner the services of somebody like you very early on in the process, so you can help guide those E2 investors in the best way to set themselves up for success and approval of that E2 visa. Tell our listeners a little bit about your services as the E2 visa attorney.
I'd be happy to. So my services are A to Z to make sure everything's done the right way, the optimal way to maximize my client chances of E2 visa success. So I usually like to guide the clients from the very beginning before they've done anything, including advising on the ideal business models, how to properly select a business for the E2 visa, whether it's buying a resale or a new territory or business startup, and then guiding them on proper source of funds and how to set up the business and deploy that investment money, spending it in a qualifying way for the E2 visa. So there's a lot of guidance on the business investment, business setup, business acquisition, business structure side. And then once that's accomplished, I would prepare the E2 investor visa application and submit it on behalf of my clients to the U.S. immigration authorities as their legal representative. And if they're applying for the E2 visa with the U.S. embassy in their home country, there will be a visa interview. And I also prepare clients for that interview, usually through like an online video call where I prepare them for the common interview questions so they can go into that interview with the visa officer and give a confident and thorough and complete answers to the officer's concerns and questions.
Well, and I think that's a critical point. I worked with a candidate in the last year who she did employ the services of a different E2 investor visa attorney from her home country, but she didn't prep for the interview and she didn't pass the interview. And so she had to go through another waiting period of time before she could reapply and have that second interview. So it's important to prep and know what to expect during that interview process.
Absolutely, very important.
So what role does a franchise consultant play in helping your E2 investor visa clients find a great business?
A franchise consultant is an important partner in helping my E2 visa clients achieve success in getting that visa approval. Especially a franchise consultant that has gone through the E2 visa training and understand the needs of the E2 visa candidate. So franchise consultants that I work with have received that training and also most importantly have access to what we call E2 friendly brands. That way the consultant is able to narrow down the search in the most optimal brands for E2 visa qualification and minimize time waste with brands or business model that are not ideal for E2 visa. We usually want the consultants I work with would focus on those E2 friendly brands and help negotiate the E2, the franchise agreement and the terms. And a very popular term that most of my clients would like to add to the franchise agreement is an E2 visa contingency clause. Which is that in the event the E2 visa is not approved for whatever reason, the E2 investor has the option of terminating the agreement and recovering some of the franchise fee, and that mitigates their financial risk. Now, the reality is that if E2 investor does everything right, at least in my more than 2 decades of experience, the odds of getting E2 visa approval has been very, very high. So the odds of needing to exercise that visa contingency clause is pretty low in my experience, at least. Even if the visa is not approved, E2 visa allows you to reapply immediately as long as you can satisfy the reason for the prior visa denial. But psychologically, it really helps E2 investors feel safer and mitigate their financial risk to have that visa contingency clause. And franchise consultants that understand this are able to propose this to the franchisor or make connection with E2 friendly franchise brand that accepts that. And that makes it a lot smoother and maximizes the probability of closing the deal.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, I love sharing success stories of success candidates who have come and immigrated to the U.S. They have gone through the E2 visa application. You've helped them secure their E2 visa for them and their family. Are there any success stories that come to mind that you want to share with our listeners as examples of what a beautiful thing this can be to follow the American dream of business ownership?
Absolutely. Because E2 visa is a temporary visa, so my clients will come back to me for the visa renewal 2, 3, or 5 years later. I get to hear the story of the experience for the past 5 years. And lots of success stories. I mean, it's hard to pick one. Many clients that won the $1 Million Club with the franchisor or the President's Circle, or they tell me about how much they love living in the United States and their children love it. One story that really stands out was a client who purchased a franchise business, and I can't reveal the details because of client confidentiality reason, but I'll just kind of share the story in general where she came from a European country and she bought a franchise unit and a retail business, and she was very successful. She expanded into 3 franchise units, And she ended up getting interviewed by the local television and a local newspaper, major newspaper, did a whole feature about her and her immigration story. It was very inspiring. And she became really inspired by all the attention she got. And she asked for the opportunity to be an area representative of the franchise brand. And she was granted that. And she became kind of like an ambassador, sharing her experience with people in Europe and other countries who are seeking the American dream. So she ended up helping to sell a whole bunch of franchise unit to E2 investors. And I have a whole like tree, a family tree of clients that originated from her. And that just absolutely amazing. So I wanted to share that success story.
Yes, that's so cool. And so we work with a variety of different types of E2 investors as well. I have people who have finished their bachelor, gone on and gotten their master's, and then they get their PhD, and they're like, wait, I don't want to go have a W-2 job and be in the US on a work visa. I want to own part of the American dream and stay in the US and pursue an E2 visa and invest in my own business. I also have clients who they have citizenship in one of those treaty countries, and they are looking to relocate from those treaty countries to the U.S. And then I have clients who've been in the U.S. on a work visa for a long time, and for a variety of reasons, either they've gone through a layoff with a major company, or they're done working for somebody else, but they want to stay in the U.S. and they have a family, they have a spouse and children who are really plugged in here. So anybody could really follow this E2 visa dream of investing in a business.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
So as far as, are there any trends that you're seeing, Bobby, in the E2 visa process, or types of businesses that are successful? Talk about any trends that you might want to share with our listeners.
Definitely. So much, I don't even know where to begin. Well, especially in the last few years after COVID, but globally, there are just a lot of economic turmoil, economic downturn. And U.S. is one of the strongest economies in the world. So the E2 visa has been a huge magnet for entrepreneurs around the world coming here especially during, it's been growing a lot, the number of E2 applicants, because they're looking for a better economic opportunity, a more stable economy. A lot of people come here for a better life for their children. That's a huge motivation. Also, a lot of people are coming here for more business-friendly government policies, lower taxes, friendlier business entrepreneur policies. Florida and Texas have become extremely popular with E2 investors because, low taxes and reasonable cost of living, for example. And some clients, many people come from like Canada or Europe, just escaping the cold weather. Our country is so big, there's so much variety to choose from for their ideal life. So that's another huge motivator. Now, as far as the type of industries that a lot of E2 investors are choosing, now there's a wide range, broad range, so I'm kind of generalizing here, but home-based service businesses, I've noticed, have become more and more popular in recent years for a couple of key reasons. One is that E2 visa requires you to fully set up the business to the point where it's a real business. It can't be an early stage speculative business. That's a high risk of denial. So with service-based business, it's just much easier to set up, much less barrier to entry to get the business up and running. Whereas if you open a brick and mortar retail or restaurant, it may take a year to open up that kind of business model. So home-based service businesses have become very popular, and they tend to be on a lower investment requirement, which is also a big magnet. Not only is it faster to set up, it's easier to set up. Those businesses have less stringent licensing requirements in general. And home-based, and also I've noticed that with home-based brands, some of my clients, they are very ambitious entrepreneurs. So what they'll do is they'll buy a brand that home-based services, and they're thinking in advance, like, I fully intend to expand and buy more brands and buy complementary home services. So maybe they'll go in as a lawn care, gardening, and then after they get E2 visa, they want to buy a complementary service in handyman service, locksmith, HVAC service, home renovation, and then they can cross-sell to the same customer base. I think it's so smart. So these are some of the trends that I'm seeing over the last few years.
Well, thank you for sharing those trends. I also often get asked, like, where's the best place in the US to start my business? And I said, well, it kind of depends on, like you said, climate, and do you have family in different parts of the US? I don't know, do you have a recommendation if there are any particular states that somebody should invest in, or pretty much any 52, or if any 50 state would be fine?
All the states can qualify for E2 visa, but before I answer that question, typically I'll ask the client what their priorities are. Obviously, if they're escaping the cold from like northern countries, Canada, and then it would be the southern states, Arizona, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, California, for example. If it's they're sick of high taxes in their home country, then I would educate them on the handful of low tax states in the United, no state income tax and low tax states. And those are like Florida, Texas, Nevada, Wyoming, Washington State, and low tax states like Arizona, Tennessee, for example. And some people are looking, like a lot of people fund their investment through selling their real estate property, their home in their home country, and the sale proceeds will be used for both the investment and to get a home, buy a home here in the USA. So there's a limited budget. So I would steer them towards more moderate cost of living states. You don't want to come to California and New York if you have a limited budget, because $1 million here in LA, where I'm located, will only buy you a tiny little house. So where I would suggest where they stay in the USA really depends on their unique circumstance.
Great advice, Bobby. As always, you have great advice. You also provide so many resources. You have a newsletter that any of our listeners can subscribe to. You have the e2visalawyer.net website that is chock full of great educational resources. What are some of the tools and resources that if somebody visits your website, e2visalawyer.net, that they might find there?
Absolutely. I have an ebook they can download, which has the top 12 FAQs on E2 visa program. And then I have more than 100 videos that tackles very specific issues, fund source, business structure for E2 visa compliance, and a ton of blogs. So it's basically a resource website for the E2 visa program. It's a reflection of my passion on the entrepreneur visa and my dedication. So I'm constantly updating with more and more knowledge base and free info for the general public.
Well, and you also have a few more success stories on there. I'm looking at it now. So your home repair story that you shared with us, tutoring franchise, Thai restaurant. I want to make sure our listeners know that while there's hundreds and hundreds of franchise opportunities out there, there's also lots of different industries. So we talked a little bit about home services. There's restaurants that I think we most commonly think of, but there's more than 65 different industries. So really, you can find a business that aligns with your passions and experience and some of the interests that you might have as you start that next chapter in your family's journey in the U.S.
Absolutely.
So what are you most excited about for the future of business ownership in the United States, Bobby?
Oh, I am super excited. This is my passion. I'm an entrepreneur myself, having my own law firm for over 20 years now. So I'm an advocate of the E2 visa program. And I'm also a huge benefactor of the American dream. So I'm constantly giving people guidance on how they can achieve this American dream. E2 visa program right now, it gets about 50,000 applicants per year. I'm noticing a trend of about 10% increase every year. So it is becoming more and more popular. It's more popular with certain countries. There are about a handful of countries that dominate the E2 visa program that represents more than 70% of the E2 applicants. My hope is that this E2 visa opportunity will be spread out throughout even more countries. Recently, the countries of Portugal were added to the E2 visa program, and lots of Portuguese have been reaching out, learning about E2 visa. And Israel and New Zealand were added a few years ago. So I'm hoping that more and more countries will be added to the program, and we can help more and more people out there.
And about how long does it take to, I know it varies significantly, but about how long does it take for somebody to secure an E2 visa?
Oh, very good question. Very common question. So there's basically two stages to the whole process. The first stage is making the investment and qualifying business. The second stage is applying for the visa. And if they're applying with the U.S. Embassy abroad, for most people, the embassy E2 application process roughly range between 1 to 3 months. Just depends on how busy the U.S. Embassy is. Some embassy take longer time than that, of course, and some cases get stuck in security background check, but generally it's between 1 to 3 months U.S. Embassy E2 application time. Before they can apply, how much time it takes for them to select the business, make the investment, and set up the business to the point of being a real operation is going to be different for everybody, and also very dependent on type of business that they invest in. That's why typically, obviously the most important thing is the E2 investors' personal interest in the type of business that they want to own and operate. But because the type of business they choose affects how long it takes to set up the business, typically choosing a service business would allow the business setup to be completed within a reasonable time. And in my years of experience, if they're investing in a not super complicated business, a service-oriented business, typically somewhere between 2 and 5 months is the amount of time necessary to select the business, make the purchase, and set it up to the point where we're able to apply for the E2 visa. So generally speaking, 2 to 5 months on the investment and business setup, and then up to 3 months on the E2 embassy E2 application process for most people.
So it could be start to finish anywhere from 5 to 8 months on average. So, but it can vary. It can be faster. It can be slower. So these are just guidelines. And if somebody is interested in taking a look at my website, that is e2visafranchising.com. I have some useful tools on there, as well as a link to the 83 E2 visa treaty countries on that website. You can book a call with me. I'm happy to chat more with you about franchising and be happy to introduce you to Bobby, who's just terrific to work with. Bobby, do you have anything else that you would like to share with our listeners today?
Definitely. For those that are new to the E2 visa, or may feel like it's complicated, or may feel like they not sure how to qualify their investment funds for the E2 visa program, I highly encourage you to seek expert guidance and learn all you can about it, because it is very possible to qualify for it. And there are various strategies, and there are a range of qualifying sources, of investment fund sources. So having a proper and correct understanding of the requirements based on expert guidance could make this E2 visa opportunity very realistic and very possible for you.
So I do have one more question that leads me to. So I'm online on these E2 investor visa chat boards on social media and whatnot. And some people are like, you just do it yourself. It's not that hard. But going it alone, I think, really does decrease your chance of setting everything up successfully the first time and correcting any mistakes along the way. What is your advice to anybody who is on one of those chat message boards that feels they might be able to do it alone?
Yeah, I mean, you're not required to have an attorney when applying for E2 investor visa. And there are people out there I've seen in my 24 years of experience, I've seen people do it on their own. But for most people I've contacted, being in communication with, is the process and requirements are too complicated to completely understand and have a grasp on their own. And they really benefit from the expert guidance to make sure each and every step of the way is done right. And here's the thing, the US government expects these folks to invest their money first, spend their money into the US economy to demonstrate a real financial contribution to the United States before they're allowed to apply for E2 visa. So the US government expects these folks to take quite a financial risk for the E2 visa. And if there's any like mistakes or business setup or investment steps that's not done in an optimal way that resulted in a visa denial, the consequence is could be serious, because you've already spent your money, and if you don't get the visa, it's quite a pickle, although you can reapply, but some mistakes are not fixable, such as the wrong source of funds. So I think just like with any professional endeavor, having the, it's a concept of penny wise, pound foolish. You know, if you get the right, if you do everything right, you maximize the chances, that would be most likely well worth the attorney's fee invested.
Well, as always, it is great to chat with you, Bobby. You are an expert in the E2 investor visa space, and love your story of being an immigrant to the U.S. and then pursuing business ownership yourself 24 years ago. Looking forward to helping those listeners who may have an interest in learning more about the E2 investor visa and franchising process, and appreciate everyone listening to the show today.
Thank you so much, Laura.